Imagine a world where the first black First Lady of the United States wasn't Michelle Obama, but rather the iconic Jacqueline Kennedy. It sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? Yet, according to some historians and the controversial one-drop rule, this might not be as far-fetched as it seems. But what's the real story behind Jackie Kennedy's rumored African ancestry, and why has it been a subject of speculation for decades? When society photographer Cecil Beaton met Jackie Kennedy at a dinner party in England in 1961, he made a curious observation in his journal. He noted that the First Lady had a Negroid appearance, describing her as having huge baseball player's shoulders and haunches, big boyish hands and feet, very dark, beautiful receptive eyes looking roguish or sad, sometimes they pop too much, mouth very large and generous with a smile turning down at the corners in an inverted laugh, a somewhat Negroid appearance, the suspicion of a moustache and very black hair. This single comment sparked a firestorm of speculation that has persisted to this day. Could one of the most famous First Ladies in American history have had African roots? To understand this possibility, we need to look closer into Jackie's family tree and the complex history of race in America. But first, let's learn about the woman herself, who captured the nation's heart and became an enduring symbol of style and grace. Jacqueline Lee Bouvier was born on July 28, 1929 in Southampton, New York, to a life of privilege. Her father, John Vernou Bouvier III, was a wealthy stockbroker on Wall Street, while her mother, Janet Lee Bouvier, came from an affluent family with Irish and English roots. From an early age, Jackie was groomed for success, receiving the finest education and cultural experiences money could buy. As a child, Jackie developed a passion for horseback riding, winning several national championships by the age of 11. The New York Times wrote in 1940, Jacqueline Bouvier, an 11-year-old equestrian from East Hampton, Long Island, scored a double victory in the horsemanship competition. The occasions are few when a young rider wins both contests in the same show. She was also an avid reader, devouring books well beyond her years. Her heroes included Mowgli from Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, Robin Hood, Little Lord Fauntleroy's grandfather, Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind, and the poet Byron. These early interests would shape her future persona as a cultured and refined First Lady. Jackie's education was as impressive as her upbringing. She started at Miss Chapin's school in New York, where one of her teachers, Miss Platt, described her as a darling child, the prettiest little girl, very clever, very artistic, and full of the devil. However, her mischievous nature sometimes got her into trouble, with her headmistress once writing on her report card, Jacqueline was given a D in form because her disturbing conduct in her geography class made it necessary to exclude her from the room. After attending Miss Porter's school, an exclusive boarding school for girls in Connecticut, she went on to study at Vassar College. Her junior year was spent abroad in Paris, an experience that deepened her love for the French culture and language. She lived with the de Renty family at 76 Avenue Mozart, immersing herself in French culture and language. She later wrote about this time, I loved it more than any year of my life. Being away from home gave me a chance to look at myself with a jaundiced eye. I learnt not to be ashamed of a real hunger for knowledge, something I had always tried to hide, and I came home glad to start in here again, with a love for Europe that I am afraid will never leave me. She completed her degree at George Washington University, graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in French Literature. In 1951, Jackie began her career as the inquiring camera girl for the Washington Times Herald newspaper. This job involved roving around Washington, D.C., taking pictures of people she encountered, asking them questions on issues of the day, and weaving their answers into her newspaper column. During this time, she interviewed numerous notable figures, including Richard M. Nixon. She also covered significant events such as the first inauguration of Dwight D. Eisenhower and the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. It was during this period that she met her future husband, John F. Kennedy, the Congressman of Massachusetts. The wedding on September 12, 1953, in Newport, Rhode Island, was the social event of the season, uniting two of America's most prominent families. After their honeymoon in Mexico, the Kennedys returned to Washington, D.C., where John F. Kennedy was recovering from back surgery. During his recovery, Jackie encouraged him to write Profiles in Courage, a book about U.S. senators who had risked their careers to fight for their beliefs. The book went on to win the Pulitzer Prize for Biography in 1957. As the wife of a rising political star, Jackie quickly adapted to life in the public eye. When Kennedy announced his candidacy for the presidency in 1960, she played a crucial role in his campaign, despite being pregnant with their second child. Her grace, intelligence, and multilingual abilities made her an asset on the campaign trail and later on the world stage as First Lady. During the campaign, Jackie's pregnancy confined her to her home, but she found ways to contribute significantly. She answered hundreds of campaign letters, taped TV commercials, gave interviews, and wrote a weekly newspaper column called Campaign Wife, which was distributed across the country. Her efforts paid off when John Kennedy narrowly defeated Republican Richard Nixon on November 8, 1960. Once in the White House, Jackie embarked on an ambitious project to restore the historic residence to its former glory. She transformed the White House from a simple government building into a museum of American history and culture. She established a fine arts committee for the White House and created the post of White House curator. Her efforts involved gathering outstanding examples of American art and furniture from around the United States, including many items that had belonged to former presidents and their families. Her televised tour of the restored White House on February 14, 1962, was a landmark moment in television history. The program, broadcast on CBS and NBC, was watched by 56 million viewers and later aired in 50 countries. It earned Jackie an honorary Emmy Award, adding to her growing list of accolades. As First Lady, Jackie became known for her impeccable style, her promotion of the arts, and her role as a cultural ambassador for the United States. She traveled extensively, charming world leaders and the public alike with her grace and knowledge of foreign languages and cultures. Her trips to France, Austria, and Greece in 1961 were particularly successful, prompting President Kennedy to quip, "I'm the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I have enjoyed it."
I am the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I've enjoyed it.
Clark Clifford, an advisor to President Kennedy, praised her, saying, "Once in a great while, an individual will capture the imagination of people all over the world. You have done this. And what is more important, through your graciousness and tact, you have transformed this rare accomplishment into an incredibly important asset to this nation." Jackie's influence extended beyond her role as First Lady. She was instrumental in shaping the cultural atmosphere of the Kennedy White House, which became known as Camelot. She invited artists, writers, scientists, poets, and musicians to mingle with politicians, diplomats, and statesmen at White House events. After one such visit, the world-renowned violinist Isaac Stern wrote to Mrs. Kennedy, "It would be difficult to tell you how refreshing, how heartening it is to find such serious attention and respect for the arts in the White House. To many of us, it is one of the most exciting developments on the present American cultural scene." But behind this carefully cultivated image of perfection, there were whispers and rumors about Jackie's heritage. Her father, John Bouvier, was often referred to as Black Jack due to his dark complexion. Jackie's classmates and Miss Porter's school even questioned whether he was really white. These rumors gained traction when genealogists began tracing Jackie's family tree back to the Van Silly family, early settlers of New Amsterdam, later New York, in the 17th century. Anthony and Abraham Van Silly, Jackie's ancestors, were described in several historical documents as mulatto. The Van Silly brothers were the sons of Jan Jansoen, a Dutch pirate who had turned Turk and became an admiral in the Moroccan Navy. While their father was undoubtedly Dutch, the identity and ethnicity of their mother remain a subject of debate. Some historians believe she was a concubine of mixed race, possibly from North Africa. Anthony Van Silly in particular was a controversial figure in early New Amsterdam. Described variously as Tawny, half Moroccan, and mulatto, he was known for defending minorities and was eventually forced to move across the river to what is now Brooklyn due to conflicts with his neighbours. His property abutted Coney Island, which until the last century was also referred to as Turk's Island, a nod to Anthony's heritage. The Van Silly family's influence extended far beyond Jackie Kennedy. They were also ancestors of the Vanderbilts, the Whitneys, and even Humphrey Bogart. This connection to some of America's most prominent families add another layer of intrigue to the story of Jackie's potential African ancestry. But what does all this mean in terms of Jackie Kennedy's racial identity? This is where the controversial one-drop rule comes into play. This rule, which was actually law in many states until the 1960s, stated that a person with any amount of African ancestry, no matter how small, was to be considered black. Under this rule, if the rumors about Jackie's Vancelli ancestors were true, she could technically be considered the first black First Lady of the United States. This would predate Michelle Obama's tenure by nearly half a century. However, it's crucial to bear in mind that the one-drop rule is a social and legal construct rooted in America's history of racial discrimination. It's not based on any scientific understanding of genetics or heritage. In fact, genetic studies have shown that a significant percentage of people who identify as white Americans have some African ancestry. The speculation about Jackie's race didn't escape the attention of civil rights activists of the time. According to some accounts, the New York Genealogical and Historical Society approached Mrs. Kennedy during her husband's presidency, hoping to discuss her African ancestry. They believed that acknowledging this heritage could help advance the cause of civil rights. However, Jackie reportedly insisted on referring to her Vancelli ancestors as Jewish, effectively sidestepping the issue of potential African heritage. This response has been interpreted in various ways over the years. Some see it as a denial of her African roots, while others argue that she may simply have been repeating family lore or trying to avoid a potential controversial topic. It's worth noting that Jackie Kennedy lived in a time when mixed-race heritage was often hidden or denied due to societal prejudices. If she was aware of any African ancestry, acknowledging it publicly could have had significant personal and political consequences. Moreover, the question of Jackie Kennedy's race is complicated by the complex history of the Vancelli family. While they were described as mulatto in some documents, this term had a different meaning in the 17th century than it does today. It was often used to describe people of mixed European and Middle Eastern or North African descent, not necessarily those with sub-Saharan African ancestry. Some historians argue that the Vancellis were more likely of Moorish descent, that is, North African or Middle Eastern, rather than sub-Saharan African. The Moors, who ruled parts of Spain and North Africa for centuries, were a diverse group that included people of various ethnic backgrounds. This interpretation adds another layer of complexity to Jackie's heritage. If her Vancelli ancestors were indeed Moorish rather than sub-Saharan African, would she still be considered black under the one-drop rule? The answer to this question depends on how one defines race, a concept that is increasingly recognized as a social construct rather than a biological reality. The truth about Jackie Kennedy's ancestry remains elusive. While there's evidence to suggest she may have had some African or Moorish ancestors, the extent and nature of this heritage are still debated by historians and genealogists. As one genealogist put it, "My understanding from reading reputable scholars is that Jackie Kennedy's black ancestry is really a misinterpretation of her Moorish Vancelli roots. The only sources I can find saying that she had black ancestry are unsourced listicles that refer back to each other. I don't think this is whitewashing. It looks like her heritage really wasn't black in any modern sense."